September 2024. In a Delaware bankruptcy court, one of California's biggest wine companies is being sold for parts. 11 wineries, 9 tasting rooms, more than 60 brands, vineyards from Napa to Santa Barbara. Everything must go. The biggest buyer in the room is not a wine dynasty, not a French luxury house. His name is Jay Adair, and he made his estimated $2 billion fortune on wrecked cars. His company, Copart, runs America's salvage auctions, totaled sedans, flood trucks, cars nobody else wanted. Now for $85 million, he owns 5 of California's storied estates: Clos Pegase, Girard, B.R. Cohn, Kunda, and Bianca. Wineries that took families generations to build, sold the way America sells a crashed car. And Adair wasn't even the strange part. A title insurance billionaire was bidding in the same auction. That same year, private equity paid almost $2 billion for another California wine company. All of this while wine, the drink, the industry, the dream, is having its worst stretch in a generation. So this video asks the question with an uncomfortable answer. When a winery fails, and right now a lot of them are, who buys the wreckage? And what exactly are they buying? It may not be the wine at all. To understand what the salvage king saw in wine country, you have to see the crash first. The company on the auction block was called Vintage Wine Estates, Santa Rosa, California. And in 2021, it was a Wall Street story. It went public through a SPAC, a blank check merger, at a valuation of roughly $600 million. 60 plus brands, mostly $10 to $20 bottles. The pitch: roll up small wineries, ride the boom. A leaked SPAC pitch deck had promised investors $80 million a year in earnings. What the company actually reported 3 years later was losses. The stock touched $12.63, then it fell, and kept falling. On the day the company filed for bankruptcy, it was trading at 11 cents. July 24th, 2024. Chapter 11. $310 million of secured debt. 377 employees. 1,850 acres of vines. All of it headed for the block. 2 months later, the entire company sold in 10 transactions for about $158 million. Roughly a quarter of what Wall Street had once said the whole business was worth. How does a company holding some of the most recognizable names in American wine lose 99% of its stock value in 3 years? The easy answer is debt, and there was plenty, but the real answer is bigger than one company. Vintage wasn't unlucky. It was early. Every January, a banker named Rob McMillan publishes the report the wine industry actually reads. He's been writing it for 25 years. His survey asked wineries to rate their own financial health. In 2022, 4% of them said very weak. By 2025, 11%, nearly tripled in 3 years. And the market is splitting in two. The top quartile of wineries is still growing. Sales up 8%. The bottom quartile is shrinking by 10, and the gap keeps widening. McMillan's own warning: this is not a cycle you can wait out. Then, in February 2026, the wave broke. In a single stretch, Ernest, Margins, Arista, and a winery named Subject to Change celebrated small California producers, announcing they were done. Some had already made their final vintage quietly, selling down the last bottles before closing the doors. The giants felt it too. Gallo, Jackson Family, Foley, closing production facilities, consolidating winemaking into fewer addresses, laying people off. The Chronicle's senior wine critic put it plainly: we're no longer waiting for the wave, it's crashing into us. Even one of America's biggest wine companies decided to stop owning everyday wine. Constellation Brands sold its entire mainstream portfolio, Woodbridge, Meiomi, Cook's, to focus on, quote, higher growth, higher margin brands. Not distress, a healthy company, walking away from the everyday bottle. Why? We made an entire video about that. The world is drinking less wine, year after year after year, which leaves the industry one option nobody likes to say out loud. If nobody's going to drink it, stop growing it. France, the country that made wine a civilization, is now paying its wine growers to destroy their vineyards. 4,000 euros per hectare, ripped out for good. 130 million euros in the 2026 program. The target, 28,000 hectares. Nearly 6,000 growers applied. And this is the second round. The 2024 program already uprooted 27,000 hectares, with a promise written into the contract: no replanting. The reason is in the glass. The French drink a third of the wine their grandparents did, 120 liters a year, down to 40. And the machines are real, excavators, working down rows that took generations to grow, in Bordeaux, of all places. Australia is doing the same math. Consultants there say 20,000 hectares of vines need to go. One grower bulldozed half his vineyard. The vines were perfectly healthy. A third-generation winemaker there calls it the end of an era. And in California, you can watch the retreat from space. We showed you this number in our first video. Satellites mapped 38,000 acres of vines removed in under a year, about 7% of everything the state had planted. Industry forecasters said 2025 was on track to be California's smallest grape crush in 30 years. Not because the fruit failed, because nobody bought it. By one industry estimate, roughly a quarter of the crop was left hanging on the vine. Dave Massoni has farmed in Healdsburg since he was 18. His family has been there 150 years. This is the worst year I've ever seen. I have beautiful fruit just hanging on the vine and I can't sell it. I had prospective buyers, but they all went silent. After 20 years selling grapes to Constellation, his contract was canceled. He's leaving, moving to Nevada. Katie Bacigalupi-Rowe watched her family's Zinfandel rot after the rains. We could not have asked for a better vintage, which also makes it more unbearable that they're left on the vine. Some growers price out what removal alone would cost and simply walk away. Vineyards abandoned in place. Others plant almonds. One Lodi farmer put it this way: almonds, you don't have to talk to anybody. There's just a demand. Fields cleared, brands for sale, the middle of the market on fire, which brings us back to the question from that Delaware courtroom. What are the buyers actually buying? Rob McMillan lays out the choices facing a distressed owner. Keep investing and hope. Sell the operating business now, or wind the winery down and hold the real estate. Because here's what the appraisers who value wine country for a living are seeing. In May 2026, 131 California vineyards were listed for sale, far more than normal, and few deals ever close. Why? Because buyer and seller aren't pricing the same thing. The sellers are pricing a winery. The buyers, many of them, are pricing land. Appraisers report that buyers who want the land for something else, almonds, row crops, anything but wine, now assign the vines themselves little value, no value, or negative value because ripping them out costs money. Let that land. To the next buyer, the vines can be worth less than nothing. Once you see that, the auction room makes sense. Bill Foley, the title insurance billionaire, announced in June 2024 that he was done buying wineries. 1 month later, Vintage filed for bankruptcy. Foley bought 5 of its brands for $15 million. Asked about the reversal, he declined to comment. And at the very top, the money is still fearless. Butterfly Equity, a private equity firm, paid $1.95 billion for the Duckhorn portfolio. a 65% premium, reported as the largest private equity buyout in wine industry history. That's the shape of the sell-off. Luxury commands a premium. The middle sells for parts. And underneath it all, Macmillan again. Buyers value wine properties. In his words, substantially lower than their owners do. That gap has a name. It's the distance between the dream the seller built and the dirt the buyer sees. So, is this how American wine ends? It isn't. We know, because it has happened before. 1988, Europe's infamous wine lake. You met it in our first video. An EU scheme took out 320,000 hectares of vines over 5 years, more than 10 times what France is uprooting now. Wine didn't die. It got smaller. And that's what a clearing looks like. The middle hollows out, the top consolidates, the land moves on, to almonds, to other crops, to whatever pays. Brutal and ordinary. It's what happens when any crop outgrows its demand. But spreadsheets miss things. A year after the bankruptcy auction, the salvage billionaire had hired back as many as 200 of the failed company's former employees. Jay Adair on the record, "It's been great just to be able to hire so many folks back. It's hard to be in this business and not be passionate about it." And at Close Pagaze, the estate he bought out of the wreckage, the new owners are reportedly stripping off the corporate blue paint, restoring the winery's original earth tones. Make of that what you will, but it looks less like a teardown and more like a bet that what's left is worth keeping. So here's the honest ending. The great wine sell-off isn't wine dying, it's wine shrinking, back toward the people and places that actually earn their keep. It's the third chapter of the story this channel has been telling. Why nobody's drinking. The fraud that follows a struggling market, and now the wreckage, and who's buying it. Because the story of wine right now isn't written in tasting notes, it's written in the land. Real stories from the ground up. That's what this channel is for. Subscribe.